To begin, we need to understand that our Earth is extremely old. Actually, we refer to it as being primitive. Did you know that scientists estimate that the Earth came into existence approximately 4.6 billion years ago? And what we are going to be looking at is how has the Earth changed and what happened throughout these time periods that we are going to be talking about. All the scientific evidence gives us an indication that the Earth is around 4.6 billion years old. And if we look at the Earth today, if we do science experiments, look at the oceans, the rocks, if we look at all of these things, they are very different today compared to how they were millions of years ago. So what we are going to be looking at is our Earth as we know it has changed. And one of the most important things that we will notice is that it is changing all the time. And in this changing Earth, living organisms, quite simply, need to adapt in order to survive. Otherwise, they will cease to exist and become extinct. So when we look at it, what happened? Our Earth changed, the continents moved. There's volcanoes, meteorites, there's ice ages. Lots of things are going to happen that cause these changes, and that's going to play a role in how living organisms adapt to their environment. The first thing that we are going to be looking at is life. Initially, the Earth was not able to sustain life. There wasn't enough gases, oxygen. It was extremely hot. We would have burnt to death with solar radiation, etc. So what had to change so that these living organisms were able to survive on Earth? We had to have this very important gas called oxygen. We needed the oxygen to survive. Let's take a look at the relationship between the history of life and other important events. Let's begin with increase in oxygen levels. Now, scientists think that the atmosphere on primitive Earth had very little or no oxygen. And remember, as we said earlier, this was between 4 to 6 billion years ago. So because of the absence of oxygen, gases that were present in the atmosphere during that time started to form organic molecules like fatty acids and proteins, which are actually the building blocks of living organisms. The first formed life forms were the prokaryotes, right? They are very similar to some present-day bacteria, okay? So these prokaryotes developed at about 3.5 billion years ago. They were prokaryotes, meaning these prokaryotes did not require oxygen for their activities. They were able to release energy from their food supply without the use of oxygen. We say that they were anaerobic. Repeat after me. Anaerobic. What does anaerobic mean? It means that these organisms were able to release their energy from the food without any use of oxygen. So they did not require the use of oxygen in order to survive. Then gradually, between 3.5 and 2.5 billion years ago, different types of bacteria began to develop. Amongst these were the blue-green bacteria known as cyanobacteria. They were able to manufacture food by the process of photosynthesis. Now we know that during photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is the gas that is needed or taken in, while oxygen is the gas that is released as a waste product. Now, during photosynthesis, what happened? More and more oxygen started to gather or collect in the Earth's atmosphere. And then what happened? The living organisms, which depended on oxygen to release energy from their food, developed. These organisms were known as aerobic organisms. Aerobic is the opposite of anaerobic because aerobic organisms require the use, they depend on oxygen in order to survive, while anaerobic organisms were able to survive without the use of oxygen. So, bottom line, scientists started to believe that the absence of oxygen led to the creation of life itself. But the increase in oxygen levels led to an increase in the diversity of living organisms. This means that the increase in oxygen levels in the atmosphere resulted in an increase in a variety of living organisms on Earth. In the next video, I will be discussing relationship between the history of life and the cooling of the Earth, or we can call it climate change, and the example would be the ice ages.